Good morning, Todd. Thanks so much for having me. Great day.
The state Senate, but also the state House, and what's going on down in Harrisburg. Carlos, first to you.
Well, good morning, America. And I guess I want to start with the idea that the argument that the people is a great beast that cannot handle freedom, which is the cannot be trusted to play responsibly with the freedom of America. All of these things are lies, and that's the entire platform of the last one. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people struggle to understand what republicanism is and conservatism is, and what's a liberal, what's a conservative. I think that being a conservative means telling the truth, no matter how brutal that truth is, and sometimes you have to be perverse in how you present that truth, because as conservatives, the answer to the question that I asked a couple of weeks ago is, why do conservatives not fight? Is that they don't fight because they think that they know the truth and they understand the truth, and they think that everybody else understands the truth. And that's really not it. That's not what's happening. Everybody else doesn't understand the truth. And that was punctuated by the conversation that I had even 3 or 4 weeks ago with a man that I met that said that, we don't have rights. We have privileges, and they can be taken away at any time. Well, you can't. That's why we have a set of rules called the Constitution on Bill of Rights. Beyond the fact that there's a set of rules in life, and those are called ethics. So conservatism is truth. Conservatives don't fight is because they're on the side of the truth, and they think that everyone else has a logical connection and road to it. That being said, the question that I have for you today, Rob, and as we wait for the senator, is the following: how do we get rid and how do we extinguish, Rob, our resentment after what's occurred since Floyd, especially when anonymous Americans in places like Seattle and Portland and Denver have done what they've done? How can they be viewed as the Confederates were? They're not an army. There's no leaders, and they're just truly an anarchist movement.
Yeah, so it's a really good question, because it gets to the heart of, is there a way to solve this divide that we see in the country? When you look at the Civil War, which was one of the defining moments in our country's history, it really was a war of brother against brother. Both sides thought that they were fighting for freedom. Obviously, I think the North was right, and keeping the Union together was important, and ending slavery was important. But many people that fought for the South thought that they were fighting for freedom against oppressors. That's not what we're seeing today. It is one side, those of us that are fighting for this country, the history of it, the culture, being the greatest country in the history of the world, and wanting to protect that legacy for people of all colors, for people of all ethnicities, religions, etc. And then there's the other side, and that side wants total control. They want Marxism or anarchy or globalism, and they want to watch the country burn. They want to punish this country. They think it's evil. They're useful tools for the establishment that wants to control us all. And so the question is, how do you compromise with people that want to destroy everything about you? Make no mistake about it. These people don't want you to just vote for them and then you could go about your life. They want total control over all of our lives. And so it does become difficult then for us on the other side who are decent people or encourage free speech and encourage debate to say, well, what do we have in common with these people? Remember, one of the things about the United States that makes it great is this was a country that wasn't made for people based on a certain ethnicity. We didn't say America's for the Americans. There were no Americans. We were immigrants. And so we need something collectively to bring us together. What does it mean to be American? It's not ethnicity. It's not religion. We encourage diversity amongst those things. So we have to have a shared principle and a shared admiration for this country. And when one of the leading parties in this country and almost every cultural institution is controlled by people that hate this country and want to see it burn, it becomes difficult to then try to compromise with them and understand where they're coming from and bring us all together.
So I put up the tweet from the Daily Caller about Louis Gohmert's introducing a resolution to ban the Democratic Party. Why is this not, or is legitimate? Why or why not?
Well, it's legitimate in this sense. It's legitimate if you play by the rules of the extreme left. And those rules say that we have to cancel history. Anything that could be interpreted as a symbol that harkens back to the days of slavery or Jim Crow must be canceled. And I did a video on this 3 months ago, which said, look, if we're going to tear down symbols of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all these other symbols, why are we allowing the Democrats to use the symbol of the donkey, to use their flag that symbolized the Democratic Party since the days of Jim Crow, and to use the name Democrat, which was the party of Jim Crow and slavery? Now, I don't think Gohmert's suggesting, oh, you're no longer allowed to be in Washington if you're a Democrat. What he's saying is we should ban the use of the name Democrat because by the rules of the extreme left, we have to cancel any history. And this shows the hypocrisy. As always, what it is they'll get rid of Aunt Jemima, which ironically, they're trying to get all black caricatures out of advertising. Aunt Jemima was a great American story, someone who was a slave that became a millionaire based on her own entrepreneurship. So we have to cancel her because it makes them feel uncomfortable. But we keep the name Democrat, which was literally the party of slavery and Jim Crow. It just shows their hypocrisy.
Robert, Carlos, thank you. We want to welcome back a guest to our program. It's none other than State Senator Doug Mastriano, who is in transit this morning. Senator, good morning.
Good morning. Sorry for the delay. I'm actually in Gettysburg going past all these controversial monuments right now. And there's nothing controversial about them. All I see here, it's funny. I was welcomed on a York editorial board wanted to put together an academic discussion on the whole controversy over monuments. And they had 5 people on. I was supposed to be the 5th one. They kept me in the back room for 22 minutes. And the 4 so-called professors are sitting there smelling each other's breath saying, oh, I agree with him. And yes, they should be taken down. And these are people here who have no idea what they're talking about. And it's just ironic to me that they want to create this red herring. It's about Confederate monuments. And I'm like, then why did your people take down Columbus? Why did your people attack the World War I monuments? What about Frederick Douglass? What about Abraham Lincoln? And they just get silent and they can't stand the truth.
Senator, we're on a path right now with monuments and names and symbols and everything else. In your humble opinion, if they're going to tear down Christopher Columbus statues and like they're doing, I believe in Philadelphia with boarding up the statue of Christopher Columbus, is the city of Columbus, Ohio, and its name in trouble?
May have lost him for a second there.
Yeah.
There we go. Did you catch my question?
You take it to conclusion, where does it end? So the red herring is, of course, it sounds very noble. The Confederacy stood for all this, and therefore, it should be expunged from history. Obviously, I disagree with that view, but in the end, it's not about that. It's about just everything in general. And so where do you stop? And I'm with you. Therefore, you're absolutely right. The Democrat Party has blood on its hands and advocated all these American Japanese internment camps under FDR. There you go. Jim Crow. There you go. KKK.
Absolutely.
Democrats again. Slavery. Democrat Party. So where do you stop it? connection.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And when you talk about a red herring, I think that this is obvious when we see these Democratic leaders. For example, look at the Chicago mayor. As homicides go through the roof there and she's screaming about what's Republicans' fault, it's Trump's fault. What does she decide to do the other night? Under the cover of night, remove a statue of Columbus. And the red herring is this. If you're one of these leaders whose Democrat policies have failed these communities and failed these states, well, it's an easy scapegoat to say, oh, statues, we'll get rid of these statues. And now we're having a discussion about statues instead of the real problems affecting people through a pandemic, through the economic crisis as a result of the shutdowns, and through all of these riots and things we happen, including homicides that we see. No one's focused on that when it comes to these Democratic leaders. They're focused on removing our history.
And that's the brilliance. You know, you have to admire them. I mean, I disagree with just about everything they stand for, but they're good. They're good at distracting us. They are fantastic at changing the argument. They control the argument. They're constantly on the offensive. If you disagree with them, you know, you're all this. You know, you're all these negative things, pejorative terms. And when do we actually get to take the argument back? When do we go on the initiative?
Well, that's Carlos Saldivia here, Senator. Thank you for joining us. I don't want to switch gears here, but it's in the same light of what you just asked. And, you know, caring about the economy is caring about human life because the economy is how life is sustained. It's not a debate. So if you were the president of the United States and you had an audience of 100 million people in a speech to the nation on national television, Senator, could you tell us what precise words you would use to explain why Democratic governors never balance the potential harm from the virus against the harm from the shutdowns?
Yeah, I would point out the material fact that they're constantly on the wrong side of history and that they're more focused on party politics than what's better for the people. And that's clear watching, of course, firsthand here, the show we have with Governor Wolf, who's picking winners and losers, lack of transparency, corruption in the government here, deciding what's essential, non-essential, and then thinking a whole track record. I would also point out, as you already have, okay, when's the last time they had a Republican mayor in Chicago or Seattle? Seattle's like 1956, and say they own this here and it's time for change and stop believing the lies. The riots that they use to manipulate the people is appalling to me. You know, almost all my life I wore the uniform as a public servant. I'm not overselling my service. The point is I don't view things in a partisan perspective. The Democrats might think that because that's their worldview. But what's better for the country should be above what's better for the party.
Senator, I saw something online earlier this week where you were putting a demonstration of, I believe it was your uniform and the ribbons and the medals from your service. Can you walk Pennsylvanians and everybody watching and listening to us what those mean to you and what your family has had to sacrifice along with those who you served with going into harm's way, defending the freedoms that they just so flippantly have no issue with and want to throw them away at a whim?
Yeah, I do appreciate you letting me talk about that. So, you know, my odyssey, I got to be honest with you. I never wanted to run for office because, you know, I viewed politics as something icky, and I still do. So that's why I kind of repulse a little bit when people say, hey, why are you a politician? I'm like, I'm an elected official. There's a difference, and it's not semantic for me. So, but, you know, as I was, obviously that uniform was really wrapped up in my identity for 30 years. Really, that's who you are, and it's a source of pride, something bigger than yourself. And as I was retiring a couple of years ago, I was kind of bemoaning the condition of the country and the state to this young man, a 23-year-old kid. And I'm like, you know, what was it all worth? And I'm very patriotic. I was just at a low point, so don't take me wrong. I'm like, I sacrificed so much for combat tours, 12 years out of the country, a lot of time away from my family. And I'm handing off everything so bad to my son. And this young man looked over at me and said, well, Colonel, do something about it. And I'm like, wow, that hurt. Because I don't like whiners, and I was whining. And so many good Americans and Pennsylvanians, we see the problems in Harrisburg, but all we do is complain about it instead of doing something about it. So I ran for office, and what propelled me to office was actually just that whole idea that my job's not done. We still have to finish this whole course. That's why, you know, I for some it's symbolic. For me, it's meaningful. So that's why I turned down the very sweet pension they offer in Harrisburg. That's why I don't drive a state car with, you know, Senate plates on it. That's why I don't take the per diem or the mileage. It's all out of pocket because there's no inducement there to keep me other than my willingness to serve. And once I no longer have that urge, then it's time to move on.
Rob?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I feel the same way. When I tried to run for office, I felt the exact same way. It's not something I ever wanted to do. It's that I felt like if I was upset about the situation, I should try to do something about it. Along that vein, one of the things that I'm noticing, I talk to a lot of people here. I'm in Clarion here. One of the things I noticed talking to a lot of people that traditionally aren't involved in politics is they don't know how they're going to survive through this summer and through the fall. And they look at Tom Wolf and his hypocritical policies and the way he treated them, where he said they were cowards if they wanted to go back to work, and how he seemed to institute arbitrary policies that pick winners and losers, and they're at wit's ends, and they feel like they want to do something. So a two-part question for you. One, what can individuals do to be able to help this situation? And second, what are Republicans doing at the state level to try to fight back against some of these tyrannical measures from Wolf?
The irony of a rich man who's enjoyed all the entitlements and benefits of his life and his wealth with a and I don't begrudge him that, but it's interesting to me as somebody who doesn't know what real life is about and had not had to work for a living like the rest of us can make these draconian measures, call people like you and me cowards because we want to question his edicts and commandments. And it's just not lost, I think, on most Pennsylvanians here of the hypocrisy of this whole thing here, because of course, he shuts down the entire wood industry except his family's legacy business in York County. I mean, I wish I had the power of Thanos to snap my fingers and remove all competition, and that he could not see that was a conflict of interest. And of course, when the Inquirer pointed that out with that good article from Angela Columbine, they revoked the waiver, but the manager kept it open anyway because he had top cover. It didn't matter. He was going to operate with or without a waiver. And we just scratch our heads and say, this is what's wrong with politics and with Governor Wolf's administration. As far as what we can do about it here, I mean, there's obviously tough decisions we have to make. If you're a business owner, if you choose to be open, you're going to take on the man, the wolf. And we've seen with Taste of Sicily in Lebanon County, or Lebanon County in total for that matter, where Taste of Sicily, small Italian family restaurant, $10,000 in fines from Department of Agriculture inspectors, a bunch of cowards sneaking in, refusing to talk to the owners, just dropping the fine and running out the door like a bunch of losers. And I am heartened to answer your question. It's time to open up. It's time. We know how to take precautions. We know how to clean, our workstations. We don't need a nanny state. Governor Wolf clearly does not know what he's doing. Todd can tell you, the lack of transparency here on the numbers on why they're shutting down restaurants, in Allegheny County and all that. Watching that rodeo show there, where a governor promises to give you the justification and facts on why they're doing that. And then, of course, Secretary Levine, was it yesterday? Like, well, I'm not going to give you that. It's like, okay, so what are you hiding from us? So it's time just to reopen, understanding there's risk associated with that. And I keep telling people, and it's not hyperbole, walk as free men and women, choose to walk freely. Frequent local businesses are those who are daring to be open and to buck the system. Obviously, we can figure it out. And the great fraud that's been played upon us here, yes, I do say fraud. For a virus that I'm going to use the ridiculously high exaggerated number from our secretary, who needs to resign in shame. I'll use the secretary's numbers. It's less than 0.5% of our population that is infected by this, and we can question those numbers. But at best, or at worst, 1%, and of that, 99.6% recover. So what is going on here? Is this justified? Absolutely not.
So in closing, I want to basically tell you that that answer is a great answer, and us three are the upper tier sedition brothers. We called for that. We called for that literally on this show 6 weeks ago. We called for everyone to open and to completely ignore the governor. But is there something else that's on your mind that you would want to communicate to the people at large who are Senator? They're at the end. They're at the end, and one of the questions that I was going to ask you is will the toll from the lockdowns exceed that of the virus due to the cancellation of elective medical procedures and patients' unnecessary fear of seeking medical treatment and the psychological effects of being unemployed or losing the businesses that they built over 30 years, suicides and the ruination of these businesses, should those deaths also be counted as COVID deaths? And what else can we do for you to help you in this battle that you're championing for us?
Thank you. And thank you for that. That's a very good question there. I'd like to answer in one broad and then one specific. On the broad side here, that we're having this argument in Pennsylvania, and we know the story, 1776, where this issue started and was resolved after 8 years of fighting, of course. But 1776 resolved the issue of an autocrat or a monarch, in that case. And now we're having this debate here. We're just down the road. The light of liberty was lit. And where I'm sitting right now on the Gettysburg battlefield, where our new birth of freedom was secured in 1863. And of course, in Shanksville and Somerset County in 2001, that's Pennsylvania's legacy. And what a great legacy to the world that we've provided. Any free country, any republic goes back to 1776. And I'll make that case strongly. We could debate with the Dutch on the whole thing here. I disagree with him on that. That's an American experiment, not a Dutch experiment. Mm-hmm. So we have these freedoms, and most of us haven't had to fight for them. They've been handed down to us, preserved at great sacrifice, especially World War II and Vietnam and on. But we've just taken it for granted, and suddenly we have a governor who saw a loophole in the emergency orders and have abused his powers. And it just comes a point where we just no longer is he relevant. I make the case strongly as a retired Army colonel. We rule in the Army as commanders with two things: statutory authority, legal authority, and moral authority. And you need both to be a good commander. Mm-hmm. And in this case, the governor, where does he have the moral authority to tell us anything anymore? When after Dauphin County, no more than 25, and he's out there with marching with the cause he believes in. Right. How does he have the moral authority when he turns the other way? When Philadelphia, when it's tens of thousands sweating on each other, looting together, stealing together, and there's no problem with the virus. Now, virus is only a threat to us if you go to a bar or if you go to the beaches. It only affects middle class conservatives. I love that he's so powerful they can do that. We're being played. On the other side, specifically, our last best hope for 836 is House Resolution 836. And if we can override the governor's veto on that here, we could reopen the state. And so I'm asking people across the state to please contact all the Democrat senators and all the Democrat reps and appeal to them to open up 836, because exactly everything you said, his cure is really worse than a virus. That's not a passé comment. Because the devastation, some of these counties here reported 100 to 200% increase in just the domestic abuse. You can only imagine the sexual abuse with minors in these broken homes where people are stressed out now on booze, on alcohol, on opiates, and it's just out of control. And once we get the truth, it's going to be an awful thing to look at. Just looking at the casualty list alone, we know 68% of the deaths are completely unnecessary, but we're as a result of our failed secretary on 19 March issuing guidance, one of only 5 states, all Democrat states. Our Secretary of Health thought it was a good idea on 19 March to issue that memo directing homes to take back COVID-positive patients, unleashing the plague. Never before have we taken the sick and put them with the vulnerable in world history, but only our Secretary of Health could do that. And so 68%, over 4,000 of deaths in Pennsylvania as a result of our incompetent Secretary of Health. That the governor comes out and praises as a hero. I'm like, I don't know. Obviously, he's never seen a hero in his life, because that's not a hero.
Punctuated by the fact that she took her mother out of her nursing home at the same time. I wanted to make sure that you should let those academics know, the ones that you're meeting or you have met in Gettysburg, that General Lee was the first one to reach Appomattox Courthouse. In the surrender, he arrived first, just in case they didn't realize that. Because these academics, they change all the rules and they change history. And then General Grant came in with his muddy boots and his muddy jacket and accepted the surrender and allowed them to keep their arms and their horses and didn't arrest anybody.
Yeah. I mean, of course, receiving a surrender when the Army of Northern Virginia was marching past was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. I was just at Little Round Top telling his story. In fact, I got a little long-winded. That's why I ran late. So apologies here. But,
it's okay.
But as the Army of Northern Virginia is coming by, he writes in The Passing of the Armies, Chamberlain's book, his recollections on the end of the war. And he saw these men who were once proud, brave heroes, downtrodden, defeated. And what Chamberlain do? He rendered the first act of reconciliation that historians like me believe was he rendered salute and honors to them. He goes, they rose up with pride and rendered salute back. And we're still on a long healing of that war. You could argue we're still dealing with that 157 years later. But you see these acts of humanity even during the battle. And for those that want to talk about reparations, what do you say about the 600,000 plus casualties during the Civil War? Was that not reparations enough? We've forgotten the cost of freedom. It wasn't given to us. It was fought for.
Right. And those statues are there to make people remember the fact that in Lincoln's second presidential inauguration address, he said it. This is the way to reconciliate the country between Americans. Todd?
That's right.
Senator, I know you got a busy Saturday. We can't thank you enough for taking 15, 20 minutes with us at the top of our program. Always safe travels to you. All the best, and look forward to speaking with you in the near future as well.
Thank you, and apologies I was running late. That was on me.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. God bless.
Thank you.
That is State Senator here in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano. He is, as he mentioned, he is on the battlefield, literally, folks, every day in the Capitol, the State Senate, and even on a Saturday in his home district there in Gettysburg. Let me give you guys just a quick snippet how this ties into something we'll be talking about later in the show, but just as an example of how Gettysburg is still playing a role in today's history, not just with the monuments and the controversy, everything else. One of the dads, who's also a coach, that is with Montoursville Little League and the traveling party to the White House earlier this week to symbolize the reopening of Major League Baseball on opening day. That's Craig Weaver Jr. He and his boys were on the lawn at the White House. Now, here's how Gettysburg ties in. They were picked up on the way to Washington, D.C., having started a camping trip in Gettysburg. Details to follow.
Wow.
So, in the same vein as what we were talking about with the senator, let's throw the first question at Todd. What is the latest from Pennsylvania's COVID situation and its logic-tortured governor?
So now we're over 101,000 cases total. Again, that's not today, right? That's cumulative since the pandemic started. And that's a big number, right?
Yeah.
But what I would argue to you is that with all of the flaws in the data, all of the flaws in the time that it's taking to get testing done, testing results back, a lot of times you may be testing positive for COVID when in fact they're doing a dual COVID and influenza and or common cold test. Right? So you may show up for a common cold, but it may be counted as COVID, right? So these numbers are all over the map, okay? The death numbers, as we've chronicled since this began, have been suspect from the beginning. Senator Mastriano touched on it about the assisted living facilities, the nursing homes, and those patients that unfortunately passed away because of contracting the virus that they never should have been in contact with to begin with. So that whole process has begun as well with the reviewing of the death certificates and comorbidities and that type of deal. What the case increase has now done and led to is we're now getting a breakout in the daily numbers of Philadelphia and Allegheny counties, because think about it for a moment, folks. We're testing north of 25,000 people a day for COVID. Shockingly, the positivity rate is climbing along with the number of positive results that are coming back. Well, if you're testing more, you're going to get more positive results. That's kind of an axiom, right? Just of regular math. So that sheer statistical occurrence is now leading to more bars, restaurants, nightclubs being closed. And as you mentioned a moment ago, guys, when the governor and the Secretary of Health were both challenged on, can you give us granular detail on which particular bars are these instances occurring in, even though we have a robust contact tracing program in place in the state that they continue to champion? We can't give you that granular data.
Well, so let me put a hole in this. Your statement was that we are getting more and more positive tests, correct?
Results.
And we're doing 25,000 tests a week, a day?
A day.
Have you tried to get tested?
Have I?
Yeah.
I did in the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, I was the first media member locally, and I think in the state, to actually have a mock pharyngeal COVID test done, right? That's the more invasive one that goes.
So it was mock, it wasn't real. So the answer is no, right?
And Carlos, the reason being, there was such a shortage of tests at that point that we agreed with Family Practice Center that we did not want to use an actual test.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's start with the truth, because we're certainly going to end with it. Rob, who's sitting right on top of you, okay, works in the medical field. And Rob, have you been tested?
No.
Okay. Guess what, guys? You can't get tested. Do you understand why? Because you're not showing symptoms. So every single person that gets tested, okay, has to be showing symptoms. So what's the percentage of people that have symptoms that test negative? Those are the people that have the flu, right?
Now, let me make one clarification. They are doing the testing in the personal care homes, assisted living facilities. That is a weekly thing that's going on for all those employees and all those residents so that they can catch it early. So again, that may be contributing to the spike in numbers of tests being administered.
No, you're missing my point.
Oh, I'm 100% with you.
My point is that you can't.
Background.
Yeah, but if you're not sick, you can't get tested. So don't tell me about asymptomatic people that are going out and spreading the disease, because you refuse to test those people. So when you do test people that have the symptoms, of course, those tests are going to come back high.
Well, and
of course,
here's the thing: they're not even. Right? Like, if at least at the national level. Right?
Exactly.
And Todd, you could speak more to this at the state level, but I've looked over the national level numbers. So we have more than since June 1st, which is when supposedly, if you listen to the Democrats, this was the problem when states started to open up June 1st. And they said, that's what caused the increase in cases. Not the Black Lives Matter riots, that got to ignore the social distancing measures. But anyway, since June 1st, we've had more than 2 times the amount of tests that we had. So we've doubled the amount of tests. Yet the infected rate hasn't doubled, right? So even with their number, you would expect, like, if 5% of the people in the country have the illness and you test 100 people, on average, you would expect 5 to test positive. If you test 1,000, you would expect, 50 to test positive. Well, if you test 1 million, you would get 5%, and 2 million, it would be 5%. But the more we test, the infected percentage is going down as far as the percentage of people tested versus how many are positive. In addition to that, the fatality rate is plummeting. I mean, they were talking at one point in the United States.
It's actually lower now than it was then, right?
Right. It was 5.8 they were trying to tell us at one point.
Right.
Then they estimated it would be 2.2. And now it's looking like it's 0.5%. That's the fatality. So your chances of getting the virus not that high, like Senator Mastriano was saying, and then your chances of dying from it are less than 1%. And then you have to keep in mind that the last I checked, somewhere around 70% of the deaths in Pennsylvania were nursing homes. So that percentage of, if you get this disease, you have 0.5% chance of dying, that's inflated because so many deaths and so many of those numbers come from people that were in these nursing homes where basically Governor Wolf and Levine set up death camps where, like Mastriano said, for the first time in history, we took the most vulnerable population and locked them indoors with the virus. And then the sick thing is, they point to those deaths that they caused and say, see, look how many people died. We need to lock down. So they created the problem, and they punish normal Pennsylvanians for the problem that they created.
So here's the pushback. All these tests, Todd, that are positive, these big numbers, they happened under the aegis of social distancing, shutdowns, and mask wearing. Go ahead. Explain it to me.
Yeah, and don't forget the multiple protests that went on.
No. Let's stick to my boot on the neck of their argument. They had masks, and they had shutdowns, and they had social distancing, and it got worse. What's the answer? There is none. That's the answer.
Here's what
It's a
I'm
lie.
saying. The reason the numbers are going up, I addressed it in my opening response to your first question. It is statistical, right? You're testing more, you're going to find more. And if you're testing more of those healthcare workers that are in contact with the sick, yes, the number's going to go.
But they're not
So
doing
what
that.
we
They're
want-
shooting fish in a barrel by only testing the people that show symptoms. That's my point.
That, and then if we're going to go down this road, okay, just for 2 seconds, let's go down this road. If you're that symptomatic and you get the test and it comes back positive, why is the system not swamped?
Oh.
It's not swamped. They're recovering
Exactly.
at home 4 to 12 to 14 days, right?
Right.
I'm not going to use any names, but there's a mutual friend here in town that said a week ago today, he showed up in the ER. They ran a test. He showed up positive for COVID. He went home a couple of days later and is recuperating.
Well, Todd,
He wasn't put in ICU. He wasn't put on an event. And I'm watching the other health system down the road here a little bit. They've had one patient, one case, not even in hospital, one case in the last week. One.
Well, Todd, let me ask you this. Maybe you've seen these numbers. I remember when at first we had to shut down because millions would die in the
Millions.
U.S. and
Millions in the millions.
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 Right? That was the argument. Then it became, oh, no, it's about flattening the curve. And what flatten the curve meant was, the argument was, well, we don't want everyone to get sick at once because it'll overwhelm hospitals. So instead, the same amount of people will get sick. That's why it was called flattening the curve and not stopping people from getting sick. It's just will spread out when those people get sick. So let me ask you this, Todd. Have you seen any numbers that show that there are Pennsylvania hospitals or ICU beds that are at a critical stage?
No. And
Exactly.
they haven't been.
And they haven't. So why the lockdowns? And remember, if you go back and you read the first study, the Imperial College study that predicted 2.2 million Americans would die unless we did a shutdown, if you read the fine print there, their lockdown prescription said we would need to be locked down until a vaccine, which could be 18 months to 4 years. They said if you don't stay locked down that long, then it's like you didn't lock down at all, because as soon as you let people back out, you're back to square one. So my question to Wolf and the rest of the people that cheer for these lockdowns is, how long do you think you're advocating for this lockdown? Because if they say, no, why can't they just tell us the truth? And the truth is, well, the real truth is, lockdown until Biden wins. That's the truth. If the Democrats win, magically COVID will not be a big issue. It'll just be a disease that we deal with. But let's assume best intentions from them. Why can't they say, hey, we might need to be locked down for 8 months, for 12 months, for 2 years, for 3 years? Because they know politically that will harm them to say that. So instead they pretend, oh, well, yeah, we just need to lock down until things get better. What's the measure? The two measures you gave us, which were fatality rates and flattening the curve, right now we've met both of those goals, and yet you're still calling for lockdowns. So if you heard anything from Wolf or Levine, how long are they suggesting that we need to institute the policies that they're talking about?
Forever.
Indefinitely?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Indefinitely?
Yes.
And I was going to say, just real quick, two quick personal stories on this. One is my wife has a coworker who got tested and wasn't allowed back in work and had to take vacation days until the test came back to show if she was positive or not. She waited 10 days and then was called by the hospital and said, sorry, we lost everyone's test results from that day. So how many people got tested in that hospital that day? And they lost the results. So they had to go in for another test. So that raises an eyebrow. And then I don't know if either of you know this. If you go to Florida, say, or a state that Pennsylvania has declared is an outbreak spot for COVID, and you come back, were you both aware that you have to quarantine for 14 days?
Yes.
Did you know that state employees are exempt from that?
Because the flu is magically delicious and it knows, and it's very smart. But the answer to your question before is that the reason why they couldn't tell us that the truth about the virus and what they were afraid of, having 2.2 billion people die, wasn't because of any other reason, in my personal opinion, in anything other than they could not, Robert, they could not take the chance that we as citizens and the sovereign would decide for ourselves what to do.
Right.
They can't allow us to think for ourselves. They must tell us what to do.
Well, look, it's a two-part thing, right?
Accept the science without question. We will be told. And this is a byproduct of average people that don't understand politics, that don't understand the difference between the former mayor of Clarion or the former commissioners of Clarion County and the present commissioners of Clarion County. They don't understand the difference. They are part-time observers of what happens in politics. So, of course, it's easy to tell these citizens of Clarion what to do because they don't understand the difference. And don't listen to Robert Knorr. He's a kook. Okay, he doesn't matter. We're the government. Listen to us. That's how we got ourselves in the position to be susceptible to their fear mongering. Not to mention, what I would like Todd to talk about is the horrible, poisonous incentives that hospitals and nursing homes got by claiming that motorcycle accidents and there's a whole coterie of things that are listed as COVID deaths that are actually not. Is that not correct, Todd?
That is correct.
And then Robert, tell me the highlights, the greatest hits of those examples.
Well, for me, we talked about this before, but this actually made me laugh, although it's sad, was a case in Florida where a medical expert was being interviewed by the press, and someone in the press said there were two people under the age of 30 that passed away this week of COVID. Were there comorbidities? Because that's a newsworthy story. Journalists want to know these young people that died. Can you explain that? And the medical expert said, well, in one case, we don't know because it was a motorcycle wreck. And so we don't know if there were comorbidities. So then this got attention and people were like, you see? They're admitting someone who died in a motorcycle wreck, they checked off as a COVID death. So then another medical expert from that particular region gets in front of the camera and actually makes the argument, well, we don't know. Maybe the person wrecked their motorcycle because of COVID symptoms. Maybe they were coughing while they were riding their motorcycle, and so therefore it would be a COVID death. And this is with a straight face that someone said this, and it's absolutely incredible. To me, that's the funniest one. It's like, wow, that's amazing. They're still pushing that.
So the graphic that I have up is the coronavirus kills 2 in a meth lab explosion. This is fake news, okay? But it goes to show you exactly what these people are all about. This is how far they would go. That they would talk about motorcycle accidents and they would talk about fake results and people going and standing in line and registering and then going home because they didn't want to wait, and then 3 days later, they get reports that they have COVID. The incentives. Talk to me about the incentives in Pennsylvania, Todd. What do you know about the incentives that the government gives these people with respect, whether Medicare or whatever other type of especially from the CARES Act? They're incentivized to call everything a COVID death. Is that not correct?
That in a case. And what's happening is the different premiums, if you will, that health facilities are receiving and providers are receiving are directly tied to the treatment of COVID positive cases, or unfortunately, in a lot of instances that we've seen, the passing of folks that have contracted the virus or tested positive for the virus. What I don't want people to miss is what's really not being counted as a COVID death are all these other issues that people have developed because they couldn't go to the hospital because of lockdowns. So you're seeing strokes, heart attacks, and as we talked about over the course of this program, all the other things that have happened, right? The rise in drug use that has led to overdose deaths, suicide rates going up, just all these other ancillary issues and cases that have been caused because of what's going on with the shutdowns and the closures and those types of things. And I got to tell you, there's a reason, and I'm just going to give brief credit to Secretary Levine for pounding away at this notice every day. It's the mental health side, the numbers, the crisis hotline, and those things. Those resources are actually being more taxed, I would argue, than the actual healthcare systems. The social workers, the case workers, the mental health counselors, they are being overworked and burdened right now like people wouldn't even believe. And that's one of the other side effects of this entire situation.
I want to switch gears real quick. But before that, go ahead, Rob, and then I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Rob.
so just real quick, a couple points on that. One, let's not forget, we're just at the beginning of seeing the repercussions, right? Like,
yes.
This economic fallout's going to last for probably a decade. So we're just at the tip of the iceberg, right? Seeing the things you're talking about there, Todd. The other thing is, one of the questions I had, so we all agreed that they are fudging the numbers as far as the fatality rate of COVID, right? We agree with that. So what numbers can we look at when this is all done, which who knows when that'll be, to say, okay, how can we determine whether or not COVID was as bad as what they're making it seem as far as these deaths? And the best way I could come up with is look historically month by month at the United States and see what the average, and in Pennsylvania specifically, see what the average amount of people that died from all causes were. So for example, in June 2018 and June 2019, on average, how many Pennsylvanians died of all causes? And then look at June 2020. So if 100,000 died in June 2019 and 300,000 died in June 2020, you would say, oh, wow, COVID may have had an impact. But here's the problem with that. And this is the insidious, disgusting, like, that just makes your skin crawl portion of this, right? We will never know because of all those things you just said, Todd. There will be an increase in deaths because of all of these other factors. How many people didn't go to the hospital that maybe had a heart condition or a stroke because they were afraid they were going to get COVID? How many people didn't go get preventative treatments because they were afraid of COVID? How many substance abuse problems? How many domestic abuse problems? How many suicides or something because of economic shutdown or because of mental health issues, etc.? All of these things. The same people that are lying about the COVID numbers will point to the total number of deaths, which are inflated because of all the things we just talked about, and say, see COVID. So they'll blame all of these deaths. That's what they'll do with the statistics. They'll blame all of the deaths from increased substance abuse or mental health issues. They'll blame it all on COVID. And then they'll use those numbers to justify further taking our rights away, which makes more deaths like that likely in the future. That's how disgusting, just like they did with the nursing homes. They put everybody in the world who is reasonably objective. Ask anyone, ask someone that barely graduated high school. Hey, there's this virus coming. Who do you think the most vulnerable people should be that we should protect? Guaranteed 95% of the people will be like, the elderly? Yes, exactly. That's the case with almost every virus. Please explain to me how health experts like Secretary Levine thought it was a good idea to put COVID patients in nursing homes with the most vulnerable populations. Well, the reason is because then they could point to those deaths and say, see, look how many people are dying. We need to take your rights away. Because this is about politics first and foremost. These people want power so bad that they're willing to watch tens of thousands of people die. They're willing to ruin middle America in order for them to gain power. That's what this is about.
And middle America doesn't understand that type of thirst for power. That's the problem. You accurately predicted my question. I agree. I'm sorry, I'm taking the opposite side of this from you. these deaths should be counted as COVID deaths. But every single one of them. But, Todd, in your big Ohio-sized brain of coming up with pithy remarks, tell us what the designation of those deaths would be called. They wouldn't be COVID deaths per se. They would be designated because of COVID, because of the byproduct of what we did with COVID. So if you died because you lost your business and you committed suicide, that's a COVID death. I'm sorry, it's a COVID death. But how should it be designated? What kind of pithy designation do you think we could come up with to basically pin that on their chest? Because that's what they did, not what COVID did. Does that make sense?
Yes. And what it would be is, since COVID-19, right? There were 18 other viruses before the 19th. That's why they call it COVID-19.
Right.
Some have argued 19 was the year. Okay.
Right.
So what I would call those would be political 20 plus.
COVID political 20 plus.
Oh, I wouldn't even tie it to COVID. It's just straight, like you guys said a minute ago, it's straight politics. It's got nothing to do with a virus. It's power. So let's even go further. Political power 20 plus.
Yeah.
So something happened yesterday.
By the way, here are the numbers. 292 positives in Lycoming County, 25 probables in that number, 7,051 negatives. The numbers just came out.
Okay. So something happened yesterday. The Supreme Court of the United States rendered a verdict in the Calvary Chapel, Dayton Valley versus Steve Sisolak, governor of Nevada. And I'm going to post the Gorsuch dissension. Can you read that, Todd?
Oh, I can read it if Todd's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
Sure. It says Supreme Court of the United States, Calvary Chapel, Dayton Valley v. Steve Sisolak, governor of Nevada, on the application for injunctive relief. Justice Gorsuch dissenting from the denial of application for injunctive relief. This is a simple case. Under the government's edict, a 10-screen multiplex may host 500 moviegoers at a time. A casino, too, may cater to hundreds at once, with perhaps 6 people huddled at each craps table here and a small number gathered around every roulette wheel there. Large numbers in close quarters are fine in such places, but churches, synagogues, and mosques are banned from admitting more than 50 worshipers, no matter how large the building, how distant the individuals, how many wear face masks, no matter all the precautions. In Nevada, it seems, it is better to be in entertainment than religion. Maybe that is nothing new. But the First Amendment prohibits such obvious discrimination against the exercise of religion. The world we inhabit today with a pandemic upon us poses an unusual challenge. But there is no world in which the Constitution permits Nevada to favor Caesar's Palace over Calvary Chapel.
So, yesterday, the Supreme Court voted 5-4, with the 4 liberal judges voting as usual for outcomes instead of the law, and Justice Roberts joining them. So, you take a look at that, and then you take a look at this. Can you see this?
Yep. And for those that can't see it, this is Black Lives Matter twerking.
Chicago.
Twerking, dancing.
Right.
Looks like
Without
thousands
masks.
of people without masks, just shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
Yep.
Right. But you can't go to mass. You can't go to church. You can't, as Jason Beal says, you can't open your store. You can't send your 4th grader to school. You can't work. Can't buy groceries without a mask. You can't hold a wake or a funeral for a loved one. And you can't complain because, science. Do you remember, Robert, when you were talking about, I guess, for going on 3 months now, when you were talking about the systematic yet gradual erosion of our rights, and people laughed at us.
Right.
So now the case in St. Louis, where they took the guns away from that couple that were protecting their property. Okay. And what people don't understand is that those people that were marching, they were on their property. It looks like they were out in the street, but that street is their property because it's a gated community. That's what they don't understand. And then the activist prosecutor found out that the woman, the wife, had a gun, and the gun wasn't put together correctly. So they disassembled it and put it back together correctly, and now they're going to use it to charge her. So guns, speech, thought, religion. What comes next?
It's everything. They want. And I've talked again. There's two factions of this. There's the Black Lives Matter Antifa faction, right? They want a return to Jim Crow. They just want to be the people in charge. They want retribution. They think this country's evil. Most of them hate white people. That's what this is about. They want a racial segregated society where their preferred races are in charge. That's what they want. As a part of that, they want you. It's not that they want the elimination of police. We saw that in the Chaz zone, right? What they want is a police force that they control and they could arbitrarily use to go after people that they want. That's what they want. They want to take away your right to speak. They want to take away your right to defend yourself. Your obligation to them is to kneel before them and pray for forgiveness because you're an evil person. That's it. That's all you're allowed to do. Everything else, you will be taken apart. That's what they think. The globalists, the ones that are controlling them, the people that run corporations and the people that in the establishment Democratic Party, they want a sort of global fascism. And so they're using these Black Lives Matter people as their brown shirts to go out and intimidate people. Just like COVID, just like we talked about with it. As soon as Joe Biden wins, if he wins, all of a sudden, magically, there'll be a clamp that you won't see these riots. If there are riots and they're directed against Joe Biden or other Democrats, it will be dealt with in a swift fashion. All of this is designed because they want to take away every single one of your rights. Go through that Bill of Rights and look at them all. Eliminated. That's what they want. You don't have the right to speak. You don't even have the fundamental right to defend yourself. The government will refuse to defend you, and you're not allowed to defend yourself. That's what these people want. And we warned of this. We warned of it when the lockdowns were suggested. And I had Trump supporters and conservatives that mocked me and said they didn't want to listen to me anymore because I said...
You're anti-Trump.
That's right, because Trump gave lip service to the lockdowns. And this is what I said. You have to look at it this way. What is the biggest threat to our union? What's the biggest threat to our country? Is it the virus? No. Is it the economic shutdown? Look, that's really bad and it's going to be worse than the virus. But no. The biggest threat is Americans willfully giving up their rights under threat of unknown fear. Right. And it's now that we've set that I mean, if I would have told you 3 months ago, hey, by the way, you won't be allowed to go to church, but you'll be allowed to go to a casino. People would have laughed at me. Oh, it'll never get that bad. Now those same people swallow it like, of course, it's America. Of course, you've learned to accept the hypocrisy so much. And by the way, if you question it, you must be one of those evil racists that wants grandma to die of COVID. So you can't question, the governors that sent COVID patients in with grandma. You can't question the racists that are black nationalists like the Nation of Islam or people like Nick Cannon and other celebrities that are out there saying white people are evil and they're savages and like animals. You can't question that. You can't question the Marxists running Black Lives Matter. You can't question the health experts that say you can't go to work, you can't go to church, but it's okay for thousands of people to go out and riot as long as they're doing it in the names of Marxism and Black Lives Matter.
Social justice, dude.
Right. If you question any of that, you're a terrible, immoral person. And I'm sick and tired. If I could get one thing to the people listening to us today, don't be intimidated by these people claiming to be your moral superiors. They're not. They are exactly what they're accusing you of. They're the racist. They're the people that hate this country. They're the people that don't care if people die. They're the ones that were against a drug, hydrochloroquine, when they didn't know if it would work or not, but they feared it would work. That was why they went against hydrochloroquine. Not because they thought it wouldn't work. It was because they thought it would work. And God forbid that Trump get credit for something. So they would rather tens of thousands of die than risk the chance of allowing their opponent to get some sort of political victory. This is all politics from the most cynical, evil people imaginable that would watch people die, that would collapse the economy of this country so it could
send them
never
to
be,
their deaths.
They would send them to the
their
deaths. They would collapse the economy so it could never be recovered if it means them getting power. That's all they care about.
Speaking of this guy, Todd, tell me what happened on Thursday and opening day and Dr. Fauci, celebrity extraordinaire, and his first pitch and the total abdication of Major League Baseball to Black Lives Matter.
Where do you want me to start?
At the very beginning.
The ceremonial first pitch?
At the ceremonial first pitch.
Okay, first of all,
So
having
first of all,
thrown one of those
just give
before,
me, before you do that,
okay.
give me your understanding, because you're a play-by-play guy, one of the best in the country for my money. Okay, you're a baseball person. I think in deep down inside, you love basketball and football, but inside you're a baseball person. Give me your understanding of how you get to throw out a first pitch in an American baseball stadium in the major leagues. Tell me how that occurs. Usually.
So that's normally through game day operations and the marketing side, public figure type thing. And you get an invite. You can bring a couple of people, as you can see in the photo.
Right.
And, you normally get to throw the first pitch, and then you have a conversation with whoever catches the first pitch. You get assigned baseball by the
You're
person that catches it,
patriotic,
photo
right?
op, right?
You're patriotic. You're
What's
patriotic.
that?
You're patriotic.
Normally,
You love America. You love baseball.
one of the most memorable first pitches ever was George W. Bush. After
Right.
the event of 9/11, they resumed baseball again, and he threw an absolute strike.
Yep.
And bringing the country together. So Dr. Fauci got an opportunity as baseball came back this week with the Yankees and Nationals to throw a first pitch. Well, the pitch was so bad it almost hit somebody in the on deck circle. That's how bad it was.
Right. On the left.
Yeah, it was horrible.
On the left.
Yeah, exactly. Watch the video.
So
He
what
literally
happened?
threw the ball across his body, past the left-hand batter's box, back toward the dugout, and into near the on-deck circle.
Right. It was more of a vomitation of the ball, not throwing the ball. So now
It
he's
was
sitting
bad.
now he's sitting on the stands, right? So tell us what's happening there.
So
His hands are clasped, right?
As we've been mandated, there should be masks, and there are no fans in the stands, or so we thought, and we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. He's got his mask pulled down, and they're sitting side by side.
Right.
From what the photo is demonstrating for those that are listening, that's what the photo looks like. We actually do have breaking news from Philly, where 14 cardboard cutouts in the stands have actually been arrested in Philly. So
No mask,
that's
right?
just
No
no
mask.
mask. That's a little heads up for you.
So with Dr. Fauci, Robert, sometimes the maker of the rules must be a breaker of the rules in order to assert the rules. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's what they would have you believe, I guess. I mean, look, it's real simple. I talk about this all the time. Let's assume for a second Dr. Fauci means well. I don't think he does. I think he is someone just like the litany of people we've seen inside Trump's team. He is someone designed to destroy the country as much as possible to harm Trump's election chances. That's what I believe about Dr. Fauci. But let's assume the best for a second. Let's assume he really believes in all of the stuff he says to keep us safe. Okay, if that's true, then why are you violating your own orders? And he came out, and of course, like always, again, these people that are our superiors, our experts, the ones that make these decrees from on high saying that we can't exercise our rights, they don't look at themselves the same as me and you. Dr. Fauci looks at himself as better than you. He's a celebrity now. He's getting, what was the magazine that we talked about last week? He's getting
In Style.
In Style magazine, and throwing out first pitches. And wait a minute. This is a doctor? How did he get this celebrity status? Oh, wait, because he's saying things that these institutions like. He's saying things that the Democrats like. As long as Fauci's pushing for policies that will destroy the economy of the United States and harm the mental health of the people in the United States, he'll be celebrity number one, right? They like that. So he then, when he's called out in this hypocrisy, now remember, just the other day, there was a picture of Ted Cruz on an airplane with his mask down, drinking a cup of coffee, right? Yet that didn't stop so many people from the left saying, look at what Senator Cruz has done. He's not adhering to the mask policy. Those same people today will accept Fauci's excuse, and Fauci's excuse was this: oh, I was having a sip of water. Really? So you and the lady you were sitting next to both serendipitously decided to have a sip of water at the same time, and a camera caught you laughing and giggling? The multiple camera shots of that, but I'm supposed to believe that, you had to take a sip of water at that very moment next to a woman who also had her mask removed, presumably taking a sip of water. And Fauci says, oh, there are mischievous people out there that are bringing up the hypocrisy of this. And by the way, I got tested and was negative for COVID. This is what they say all of the time. Mayor Lightfoot, for example.
That's a pretty good photo right there, right?
Yeah, looking sharp. No mask.
He's looking sharp.
No mask there either. I wonder if the camera person, how close was the camera person? 6 feet away? Yeah.
In the interest of from a media interest, and I've done a lot of photography in my life for media. This is a cover, and I've never ever seen in my entire life a cover with a photograph of a man wearing sunglasses ever in my entire life. And the other part of this is that they, this is her with her mask off, sitting next to him. You see this? Mm-hmm. And he has no water in his hands. You're right. Mischievous. We're mischievous, but the photographic evidence says that, these people really don't care about us.
Well, look, let's just make it real simple. These same experts, I don't know if Fauci specifically said this, but the same.
I mean, where's the Veritas, right? Where's the Veritas of Dr. Fauci throwing out the first? What are you doing?
I got so scared. I went to the kitchen and got a face covering, guys.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can deal with Fauci's duplicity anymore.
Right.
Where is the seriousness? Where's the Veritas of this man with respect to what he's trying to communicate to us and how dire the situation with COVID is? And he's throwing out first pitches in baseball, and he's doing photo shoots for covers for InStyle magazine. It's a lie.
The debate's over. The debate on COVID, it's over. It's over. When they signed off on Black Lives Matter being allowed to protest, it's done. Right. I don't care what that man or any other health expert says. I don't care. By the way, I was one of the first people way back in March, early March, when the CDC came out and Fauci came out and the Surgeon General came out and said, masks don't help. I said, that's garbage. What did I say, Carlos? That's something so stupid only an expert could say. That's literally my exact words. It's on tape. And I'm here to tell you now, despite the fact that I think that masks probably do something, it probably stops some sort of water droplet. So I'm not saying it would eliminate the spread, but I think it would help. I don't begrudge one person unwilling to wear it because you're being lied to. If the rules are selectively enforced on you, I don't begrudge you not following them. I don't care what Fauci says. He's a hypocrite. He's a liar. And the same is true of all these other health experts. Unless the expert starts with this statement, all of the people that rioted and protest helped spread this disease, shut your mouth. I don't want to hear from you.
Right. So
but
that
Rob,
leads me.
They can't give us granular detail on a bar. How are they going to give us protester granular detail? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that too soon?
So that leads me into the top reasons, the top 10 reasons why we don't believe you on masks. Okay. And since I watch Robert Knorr's YouTube channel, I kind of cribbed some of these from him.
It's fine.
Number one, governors and mayors started rolling out one emergency decree after another to terminate economic activity without answering threshold questions, proof that it was a reckless overreaction. That's number one. Number two, the lockdown mandates employed mind-numbingly arbitrary distinctions. Wine stores and pot dispensaries were deemed essential and thus allowed to stay open, medical offices were required to close. Large grocery stores got the green light. Small retail establishments with only a few customers each day were out of luck. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, remember her? Notoriously used her red pen within megastores to bar sales of seeds, gardening supplies, and paint. All this is punctuated by yesterday's SCOTUS ruling on the cavalry, Dayton Valley versus the governor of Nevada. 3, by mid-March, 2 weeks before the Imperial College model was published, Italian health data showed that the coronavirus was terribly lethal to the very small subset population of the elderly infirm. Their words, not mine. And a minor health problem to nearly everyone else that was not already severely ill. The median age of the coronavirus descendants in Italy was 80 years old. They died within a median of nearly 3 comorbidities each, such as heart disease and diabetes. A median of 3 comorbidities each, which leads us to 4. The lead author of the Imperial College model has admitted that up to 2/3 of all the coronavirus fatalities because of these comorbidities would have died by the end of 2020 anyway. Damning. Number 5, Dr. Fauci, in his latest permutation about masks, said that shaking hands was prohibited, but sex with a stranger that you meet online on a sex site, totally safe. 6, Dr. Fauci sitting at a Nationals game this week, what we just talked about, with 2 people, no mask and no social distancing. These are the rules for the serfs, not the nobles. Number 7, public health interventions could have been targeted at that high vulnerable population without forcing the American economy into a death spiral, precisely like was done here in Pennsylvania. Number 8, casual observers and viewers have been left with the false impression that everyone is equally at risk, and they're not. And thus the draconian measures were justified. That's actually my favorite. Number 9, or actually number 8, coronavirus infections required that Japan, Japan, not the United States, but Japan, calls the 3 C's: confined spaces, crowded places, and close contact. Yet you prohibited people from going into their cabins and arrested a mother in front of her kid for going to a park and people from going to the beach alone. You arrested those people, and none of them submitted to the 3 C's of coronavirus infections. 9, the lack of, what I said before, the lack of veritas on Fauci's behavior doing photo shoots and throwing out first pitches. It's just fake. It is impossible to attribute the media's failure to publicize these facts about the coronavirus to just mere oversight, right? Compounded by the public health establishment and politicians being equally complicitous in creating this widespread ignorance and fear-mongering, and their jointly newfound power over nearly every single aspect of American life, dependent on the maintenance of one single tool: fear. Fear. This is why I think all of that is a farce. Your comments, Rob, and then Todd.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a really good list. And remember, what is this all about? Again, it's the goal of the establishment in this country is to usher in globalism, is to destroy the United States. And the biggest impediment to that is people that are self-sufficient, the working class in this country. The reaction to this virus is designed, just like the support for Black Lives Matter, all of this is designed to demoralize, destroy the working class in this country. They want everyone dependent on the government. because when you are dependent on them, they are your parent and they could tell you what to do. If you need the government for your livelihood, then you can't criticize the government or they'll shut that livelihood off. That's what this is about. And when you look, just real quick, I love how, and one of the things that concerns me the most is if I turn on CNN and hear Don Lemon talk, I know what Don Lemon's going to say. If I listen to Nancy Pelosi talk, I know what Nancy Pelosi's going to say. You expect them to be extreme leftists. That's who they are. But when you see, and I don't know, maybe you two can speak to this anecdotally, people I have that are friends that are on the left that happen to be Democrats, the extreme stuff that I see them spouting all of the sudden, whether it be COVID or Black Lives Matter related, like here's a position that I hear over and over from people I know on the left and online on the left constantly. How could you support President Trump? He's responsible for all of these COVID deaths and the destruction of the economy. How could those things be true simultaneously? On one hand, they're saying he should have shut down sooner. He should have shut down more. And also, we're blaming him for the shutdowns harming the economy. I mean, this is naked. This is coming from normal Americans that I'm hearing this rhetoric come from. And it just shows that this was designed, and I hate to crib from someone, but Tucker said this on his show the other night. The kind of the happiness index, if you're the incumbent, you want things in the country to be doing well. If you're not the incumbent, if you're Joe Biden and the Democrats, you want to make people's lives as miserable as possible in order to enforce change. And that's a big part of what's going on. They're lying to you. They're selectively enforcing the rules. They're crushing you economically. They're crushing your mental health. And they're happy to do it. And their bargain is this: we will never stop attacking you until you give us power. If you don't like these riots, if you don't like being locked in your house, vote for us. Magically, it will all disappear then. And so they blame all of this stuff on Republicans, on Trump, on conservatives like us. And it's all a farce. All of it. Todd?
Do you want to pivot to farces, or do you want me to address what you just said? Because I wholeheartedly agree with what you just said. I was waiting on Paul to strike up the band after the top 10. That's really what I was kind of waiting on.
Yeah. Yep, I hear you. Carlos, you're muted.
So, if your child's school doesn't reopen, Todd, should you be able to take their education dollars? Should you be able to take your education dollars elsewhere?
I think that's being talked about right now.
No. What do you think? What do you think? You got two kids in the system, or one just graduated.
Yeah.
Should you have your money to decide if they're going to shut down the school? Should you have your money go back to you so you can decide where those education dollars go?
Yeah, I think the option should be there. And honestly, the option should be there. Okay. Now that said, I think kids should be going back to school.
Okay.
In-person learning. I think they need to be back in school. And, we're going to have to deal with the virus at some point.
Give us the thunder and the lightning. What's the number of people under 18 in this country that have died from the disease?
Handful.
And what percentage of those people that died from the disease had type 1 diabetes? Go.
Well, exactly. Yeah, with the comorbidity issues.
77%.
And those type of things. Right.
That was a short conversation. 77% of the people that died under 18 that died from coronavirus, they also had type 1 diabetes.
Right. That's the whole argument with this whole virus.
How many people in the Wintersport Area School District have type 1 diabetes in your estimation?
I would say more than a handful.
Type 1. Not type 2. Type 1.
I'd say a handful.
Exactly. And can we make a contingency for them to have tutors? Yes,
sure.
Right?
Right.
Can we send everybody else back to school?
More than likely.
Has anybody tried to get Sweden on the phone, and Switzerland and Taiwan and New Zealand to ask them how they do it? Because that's what they're doing. Schools are open there.
Well, if the governor's not talking to the state senate or state house, why are we calling overseas on the taxpayer dime?
Well, listen, these are rhetorical questions, of course.
I'm sorry. Can you
but-
explain what a rhetorical question is for some of the audience that may not know? Because when they see it on social media, they're going, "Why are you asking rhetorical questions? What does that even mean?"
It's a question that anybody would ask. That anyone would ask with a sane, with intelligence, is a question that they would ask, okay, about themselves or about others that are close to them, or in general, okay. Any sane person would go and find what the information is of models that are successful in doing already what we're thinking about doing. That to me is what it means.
But to your point, it's an if you really wanted to.
If you really wanted to, yes, that is one of the things that I neglected to say, because I really have to wonder, do they really want to, right? Do they really want to? And I just don't think that they do.
And you understand they were mandated to put a plan back to return to normalcy for the fall. They were mandated to do that by DOH and Department of Ed. They had to do that to go back to school, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's virtual, in person, or hybrid. And there's nothing stopping any district or any board that says, well, we put this plan out, but you know what? It's out the window. We're changing it.
So, Robert, give me 1 minute on the beautiful highlights of the demands that are being made by public school unions before they go back.
Well, we have, depending on what union you're at, we have defund the police. That seems to be almost universal because that has a lot to do with schools. We have implement the Green New Deal and fight climate change, which clearly has a lot to do with educating your children and the ability for a teacher to be there. We have ending charter schools because, charter schools are effective and show that the teachers' unions are worthless when it comes to actually teaching your children. So we got to get rid of them. We have things like increased funding, increased benefits, and all of this other stuff. Now, look, it's real simple. During the first... I can't even remember what it was now. This is how sad of times we are. What was it, $2.1 trillion emergency stimulus for COVID? That was the first package that we put, $2.1 trillion, I think that was what it was. And of course,
×3.
Yeah, right, exactly. We've done that 3 times now. So the first one, I remember, being that I am a fiscal conservative, I was furious that Republicans were signing off on this, and I said, Mark, I was like, here's how you know they're not serious. If they were serious about dealing with COVID and the people that were suffering economic ramifications of it, then this emergency bill would deal all with that. But it's not. It's the Democrats are putting in a bunch of crap about racial reparations and making sure that there's racial diversity in the quotas of businesses, et cetera, that get loans. Republicans signed off on, even though they'll say they were opposed to it, they gave money to all sorts of places, which I'm not even going to go into now. And basically most of that money went to wealthy people and not the normal Americans that needed it. The same is true here. If these teachers are concerned about COVID, their demands would be all about COVID. It's not. Instead, their demands are all the political agenda of the extreme left, which shows you that the demands and them not going back to work has nothing to do with them fearing COVID. It has everything to do with them trying to abuse this and abuse the fact that they think they have your child's education held hostage. They're trying to play on that fear to get a bunch of personal stuff they want and the agenda of the Democratic Party. It is disgusting, and we should reject this in the strongest possible terms. And let me speak quite clearly. The teachers' union in this country are an enemy to the education of our children and an enemy to this country, period.
I pass it to you, Todd.
Yeah, it's starting to percolate with the teachers' unions, and again, you have many people that are in the age group and have comorbidities that are going to express concern. That's a whole different argument than what Rob just laid out. They're so far afield in what the demands are from what they should be,
right?
From
Exactly.
a safety standpoint and health and well-being standpoint. It's just unbelievable.
Right.
And let me be clear real quick. I'm not saying all teachers are bad, right? I think that most teachers are great and they're being misled by their union leadership, right? That's what I seriously think is happening. And let me make a plea if you're out there and you're listening as a teacher. your unions are going to ruin you. Let me give you a little lesson from my area, Clarion University. Most of the professors I know were gung-ho to embrace the lockdowns, gung-ho to say that we should all be locked down and, not go out and do things like this, and their universities maybe should shut down until we find a vaccine. You know what's happening to Clarion University now? Well, all of the state schools are combining online. That means class sizes are going to massively increase. That means there's less of a demand for professors. So guess what's about to happen to all those professors that were super cheerful that they were going to get paid by doing nothing because they were going to stay locked down and they were fearful of COVID? They're going to be in the job line just like me and you.
They're going to get laid off.
That's right. And let me tell you, high school and elementary teachers, the same is coming down the pipe for you. We are going to correctly advocate if we're not going to have in-school schooling, on-site schooling. We are going to start pushing for a return on our property taxes so that we can afford to get education for our children ourselves if it's not being offered, and they're going to lay you off. You're going to be out of a job. So if you're a teacher, please rein in your union leadership that seeks to destroy this country in order to promote their leftist garbage. Rein them in, because at the end of the day, the way this ends is you looking for a job. That's what's going to happen.
I have an idea. Actually, I have an idea in Pennsylvania, and I guess obviously in New York with the mayor saying that he wants to keep the schools closed, but he wants to keep them open for daycare for millions of kids in the state of New York and obviously in Pennsylvania. Maybe the daycare workers should unionize under the teachers union. Your thoughts?
I mean, I don't even know what.
Is that too tough?
It is. Well, it's not too tough. It's just that.
It's a little cynical, you think?
Well, it's cynical.
It might be a little bit.
But I get where you're coming from. Right. Like, explain this. What if the schools are such a... And by the way, let's not forget, this is everything we're talking about here. Remember, the very people, when Dr. Fauci says something that we find to be hypocritical, they use that as a weapon and a cudgel against us and say, you have to trust the experts. You have to trust the science. Let's not forget, when it comes to the question of should schools be open, the science isn't ambiguous. It is totally country after country after country after country shows that there is almost no danger to opening schools from COVID. It shows that influenza is a bigger danger. It shows that not only is the infection rate among children incredibly low and lower than that, not only is the fatality rate, but there hasn't even been one confirmed case in the United States of a student infecting a teacher. And so I'm listening to people, normal Americans, that are saying, but Rob, don't you see how this will spread like wildfire if we open up these schools? Aren't you the people telling me listen to the science? So everything we're talking about here is against science. It goes to show they pick and choose when they want to listen to science. It's okay for their propagandists to say, it's okay for you. We have to social distance here, but not here. And when all of the scientists, including the CDC, as politicized as they are, they've came out and said, we need to get children back in schools on site. And despite that, we still see a massive push by people that claim to be for science that are like, nope, we have to stay locked down.
So let's switch gears.
Can I ask you a quick question about Fauci for a second?
Sure.
Okay, Fauci has a boss. Fauci's boss made a media appearance earlier this week. Well, I got a question. If Fauci's the expert, then how does he have a boss?
Right.
Shouldn't his boss be the one
we
talking?
We all have a boss, okay? Someone up there, somewhere in the ethereal plane, everyone's got a boss, okay? Very much like the very next question I'm going to ask. Did the Obama administration, which included the top generals in his administration, in intelligence services and in the FBI and in the Department of Justice, including the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and the Vice President, Joe Biden, did they spy on Donald Trump? Rob?
Yes, definitively, without a doubt, absolutely proven with documentation over and over and over.
What kind of crime is this?
It's treason. It's at the very least sedition. I would argue it's treason. We have, if a foreign government did this.
It's not sedition because they didn't say anything. They did things. It's treason.
Right.
They did things.
If a foreign government had insiders in a classified presidential meeting where the president and all of his administration was there, spying on it in an effort to bring him down, we would call that an act of war. More dangerous than foreign enemies is domestic enemies within. We have every institution I can't say every. We have most institution in this country weaponized against conservatives, against the interest of this country, and against the president of the United States. When we have the most powerful intelligence and law enforcement agency in the history of the world, the entire leadership of it geared to spy on a president of the United States and bring him down by any means necessary, this is a political scandal bigger than Watergate times 1,000. Watergate was two bumbling fools rifling through papers in a hotel. This is the president of the United States, Barack Obama, weaponizing his agencies, the intelligence agency, to spy on his political rival. It should be, if we lived in a different time, the biggest story in the decade of what's going on. And I just want to say real quick, because I know people out there are disinterested in this because you can't go to work because of COVID, because of the tyranny of that, or your city's burning down because of Black Lives Matter and the Marxism that comes with that. These things are connected. They will use anything. They will use every institution to destroy this country, to destroy middle America, to destroy conservatives, and to make sure that any potential outsider like Donald Trump isn't allowed to wield real power.
Give us a 30-second overview of what happened this week that makes you say this. Tell us what happened.
Okay, so we already knew about the wiretapping, what happened with Carter Page, where the FBI manufactured evidence to spy on him. The two-hop rule means they could directly spy on everyone that talked to him and anyone who talked to those people, meaning Donald Trump. They were spying on Donald Trump. We now, from this week, what we learned is through documents that were released by the DNI, we know that there was a meeting that was going to happen where Trump was going to, and his team were going to be briefed by intelligence officials about potential foreign interference into our country, elections, and things like that. In the notes for that, the intelligence officials are admitting that their real agenda there isn't to inform the president, but to spy on the president and his team, to look for facial tics, for weird comments that might suggest that actually they are involved with somehow with this Russia collusion angle. And so what this is literally, there's multiple ways that you could spy on someone. You could use technology. You could use a wiretap. You could also use, what's the word I'm looking for? Human assets. You could use human assets. And that's exactly the type of spying this is. The very people that Trump was entrusting to inform him of possible intelligence problems that were occurring in this country, instead of doing that, their number one agenda was to spy on the president and attempt to find any dirt that they could fit in to their garbage Russia narrative that they knew was garbage the whole time. They wanted anything that they could potentially use to remove Trump from power.
Your thoughts, Todd, on is it spying on Trump?
No question.
From a media point of view, from what you've seen, why is the media silent on this, Todd?
Because the guys like John Solomon, who just recently put out a book, and when you get to the end of chapter 10, there's 140 pages of endnotes. And the reason it's 140 pages is he cites every single location and document where everything in the book came from. And he walks through the system of how they do what they do and how they put this whole narrative together. I mean, it's ridiculous. And let's talk about the media for just a second. The media obviously didn't like the outcome of the 2016 election, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that the 20 elections changed.
They're not media, they're activists. That they're propagandists. Right. Again, I say it all the time. The rule of the media is to hold truth to power. Our media covers the truth for the powerful.
By the way, broadly, nationally, broadly speaking, there are certain exceptions.
Oh, yes. You, like definitely you, John Solomon. There are good exceptions to this, but again, it's like everything else. Like, you could say the same in academia. There are good professors out there, of course, right? But the overall orthodoxy is geared towards that. I mean, look at the gold standard, the Gray Lady. We have people fleeing like rats from a ship from there because they're becoming so activist.
Right.
What I would argue is that the media carried the water for what has been proven and documented to be a hoax.
Right.
Right. The greatest hoax ever.
Well, maybe.
I mean, it's,
we haven't uncovered other ones that have happened before we were born, or the Lusitania and stuff like that. Yes. Could you
maybe
imagine?
there's
Could
a
you
pretty
imagine?
good one we may talk about later, but it's a pretty good hoax.
Could you imagine? Yeah. Could you imagine the Lusitania in the time of Twitter?
Yeah.
You know,
Unbelievable.
Talk to me about the dual reality of Portland, Robert. Is it peaceful, or is it anarchy?
Right. So if you listen to people, because the media refuses to show what's really happening in Portland, the narrative that's being pushed is, oh, this is dictator Trump. And we've talked about this in the show many times. What the left wants is to encourage mob rule, to force Trump to then try to quelch that mob rule so they could say, see, look, Trump's a dictator. That's what this is all about. So that's the narrative the media is pushing. And a lot of Americans are buying that it's peaceful and that these unmarked federal agents are in there just hauling people off to gulags. It's not true. They're marked. The reason
Stormtroopers,
right,
is what they call them.
By the way, let me just say real quick, like, this is getting off track a little. This whole unmarked issue, they're not unmarked. We know that they're Department of Homeland Security members, but the reason that the media is pushing for this unmarked thing is because they are actively encouraging the doxing of these federal officers. They know what will happen, just like when they dox Tucker Carlson, just like when they go after, the person who made the CNN logo, just like when they went after Nick Sandmann, just like when they went after the McCloskeys. They know what their stormtroopers will do. They know that if they put the information out there, that the extremist on their side will go make those people's lives a living hell. And so they are making a big point of saying, oh, these federal officers should have to, everything should be listed. Their names should be there. In fact, they should have to have on their suits, like, their home address. In fact, how about GPS directions right to their home so that the Marxist terrorists that they're fighting against could get there and terrorize their family like they did to Tucker Carlson's family. And that's what the media wants. They'll feign when someone ends up dying in one of these incidents, when a federal officer has one of their homes broken into and they're killed or their family's killed or severely injured, they'll feign, oh my goodness, that's terrible. My goodness, we didn't expect that to happen. Anyways,
it's Trump supporters that did that.
Right. Anyways, back to Trump being a dictator. That's what it's about. And then you have the reality on the ground. I always mispronounce her name. Do you guys, what's it, Kayla, McClay or the press? McEnany. Okay, I always mispronounce it. Did you see this, Todd? The other day at her press event, she actually played like 2 minutes of the violence in Portland. Fox News, including I think all the other media outlets did as well. Fox News stopped covering it because they didn't want to show the violence in Portland. That's all you need to know. That's what's happening. And I still say that the White House should be using the whitehouse.gov site, should be using these press events 24/7 to be putting images up and video up of the violence we see in Portland, that we saw in Seattle, we saw in Chicago, we saw in DC, we see in Philly, we saw in Milwaukee. Over 24/7. That should be showed to the American people. This is the Democrat Party. This is Black Lives Matter. This is what they are. Don't leave the media bury this. The fact that we live in such an Orwellian society where you have to allow yourself to be beaten by the mob, and if you don't, and you want some sort of police or federal help, you're the problem, you're the dictator, says everything. That speaks to this time better than anything I could say.
So, is this squad of secret police escorting Mayor Wheeler in Portland a menacing and menacing peaceful protesters and not showing their insignia and they're unmarked and they're not wearing name tags and they're carrying secret concealed weapons? We're going to need some answers, no, Todd?
No.
He's a Democrat mayor, so it's okay. for him to have secret police, but it's
Well,
not okay.
here's the issue. Let me get to you in another instance here in Pennsylvania.
No.
There is a Philadelphia police officer that's been charged with assault for pepper spraying. Ready for this? Protesters who were in the middle of 676.
Yep.
Roadway.
Mhm.
Blocking traffic, stopping traffic at night, could be run over, killed, whatever. And they're charging the police officer who was told by superiors, clear the road.
Yeah, no, that's my, if I'm the cop, that's my retirement. The
No
lawsuit
question.
against the police department. That's my
No
retirement.
question.
Thank you very much. Can you
So
send me
he's
on
doing
another
his job
detail?
or her job, right? Doing the job they were asked to do. And you're going to charge them instead of the protesters for being in the street, stopping. Oh, wait.
Mhm.
They may have had a permit to be in the street. You think? The mayor of Williamsport has yet to respond to me in regard to permitting for protests for this weekend, potentially, and a big one next weekend. Where's the answer, Mayor? Do they need a permit to protest and block traffic and walk in the street?
So it's just wholesale anarchy at every data point, at every geographical point.
And Carlos, to your point, again, we are putting law enforcement, police, the secret police, if you will, in harm's way for what? For what?
Yeah. Rob, is calling white people white supremacist pure racism? Similar to using the N-word? Maybe worse, actually, because only one of these things can cost someone the job, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless they are white supremacists, I guess, which is very rare. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. The entire idea of white privilege is racist. I mean, let's not forget, did you see, is it, again, the AP, did you see the story we talked about weeks ago where they finally came out and gave an explanation for why we capitalize black in black people, but lowercase white in white people?
Mhm.
It's some of the biggest garbage you will ever read. This is pure, unadulterated racism against white people. That's what it is. It's fashionable. We could talk about this for hours. Let me just go back to the most recent cause celeb, Nick Cannon, and his anti-Semitic, anti-white diatribe. Remember, the only thing that was called out about that and was deemed necessary to apologize for was the anti-Semitism. It is perfectly acceptable in this country to spew any sorts of hatred that you want against white people. It's okay to lump them in as a group. It's okay to say that they're savages. It's okay to say that they have sins of their fathers, that they are somehow responsible for things that happened hundreds of years ago. That's the only group you could do it to. Now, I don't say this as someone who's saying, oh, I happen to be white, and so woe is me, I'm a victim. That's not why I bring this up. I bring this up because this is a first step in towards actual physical violence, which we see in many instances occurring all across this country. Once you tell people over and over, this group of people based on their race is evil, people start to take that to heart. And what do you do to evil people? Well, you take matters into your own hands. That's exactly what we're seeing. So yes, to answer your questions, I understand the racial connotations of using pejorative terms towards the black community and how harmful that could be. And I totally get that. I understand. But understand that we are conflating things that occurred in the past, sometimes hundreds of years ago, with actual institutional and actual incredible bigotry, worse than we're seeing today. We're using that as an excuse to be bigoted and racist today to a different group. And that is unacceptable.
Your thoughts on Adam Carolla's idea of, quote, a life sentence, unquote, that is California. Do you feel that we have ignored the focus of how weird California is by overlooking for how long Washington and Oregon have been such anarchists, and now those chickens are coming home to roost?
That's exactly what it's the same with academia. And again, I mean, I've told my story on here before, but when I was in the debate community in 2003 through 2009, in academia, it was the left of the left. And when you came out of there and you told people the extreme stuff I was seeing, you walk into a round. Why haven't you acknowledged your privilege as a white person? Why haven't you acknowledged your privilege as a man? You should forfeit this round as a white person or a man. White people should be wiped off the face of the earth. this sort of stuff was occurring, and everyone said, it'll never come to Main Street. We'll never see it. This is what's been happening in California and Portland and Seattle and these places as well. And what it took was, understand this, and I kind of made this point earlier, the extremist, when they have the levers of power, they don't seem that extreme in the sense that they don't have to use physical violence. They don't have to be as vocal because they control power. When Trump won, that's what encouraged the crazies to come out, because they said, how dare you? The deal was we have all the power. That's the deal. The deal is we control the media, we control academia, we control Silicon Valley, we control the entertainment industry, and we are guaranteed. Hillary Clinton was born to be president. She is our queen. She was coronated to be queen before that election ever happened. And when it didn't happen, now you see the extremism. And the fact that we ignored all the signs for so long, we reap what we sow. And it's only going to get worse because we allowed this to fester. I can't stress this enough. While conservatives were fighting to win elections, the extreme left was fighting to win the culture war, and they won. They won hands down. If we don't get back into that fight in the culture war, nothing will change.
Speaking of poison, the entirety of the political part of the Williamsport Area School District is a first-rate, second-rate institution. When you allow people like Derek Dixon, also known as Derek Rizzo, to parade around and do what, Todd?
Interact with kids, first of all, doing video streams and that type of deal. And then...
Can you explain who he is? Is he a member of the school board?
He is not. He was convicted of a crime against a 14-year-old former basketball player that played for him when he was the girls' basketball coach at Williamsport Area High School, and served time for that, and was adjudicated in a window where Megan's Law had been ruled unconstitutional here in Pennsylvania, and about 3 weeks to a month later, it was ruled constitutional. So for all intents and purposes, right, he's not on the list, but the reason he's not on the list is he was adjudicated in a window when it wasn't. But what he just did recently and shared to social media is, I can't even, we'll put it into words here in a minute, but just,
so it's unbelievable. Tell us his connection to the Williamsport Area School District, specifically as to how it relates to John Doe #1 in the Myrtle Beach case.
So on August 24th, 2018, when the Millionaire Mayhem story came out, the first story about the Myrtle Beach incident came out, within hours of that story breaking, he took it upon himself to reach out to the victim's family to offer some type of assistance.
How do you think he was able to reach out to the family, given that there was no final report submitted by the principal who did the investigation of this family? How does he get access to confidential information as to who the victims are?
This is my speculation only.
Which is what?
Somebody within the district had to have provided that to him.
Someone in the know within the district that had inside information as to who was John Doe #1. So it had to be a very small amount of people. Okay, either the school administration, which included Pardo and McCann and a couple of others.
The principal and athletic director.
The principal athletic director, the leaders in the board, the investigators, and the city solicitor. Those are the people who had access to the names of the families of the victims.
The district solicitor.
Derek Dixon knew the name. Was it osmosis, do you think? Did he guess who it was?
He didn't have to guess.
For him to call and tell them that he was going to help them, and then even worse, what is the other allegation that's being leveled against him within the the family of victim number one.
That he portrayed being a lawyer.
Right. So
That
this
there was
man
a referral to a lawyer, and then when they tried to reach out to the lawyer, he was being portrayed. There's an allegation that he and people around him portrayed that lawyer to the family.
Right. And of course, the beautiful thing, because America is great and there is a God, is that there's evidence, isn't there?
Oh yeah, there's any number of
without letting the cat out of the bag.
Documentary evidence that there were conversations going on. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now we arrive at what happened and the story that was published yesterday. Tell us. We got 10 minutes left, so make it quick.
I'll make it quick. The headline on TalkWilliamsport.com and the headline of the story is Derek Dixon has Jesse Smollett holding his beer, or Jesse Smollett holding his beer.
Right.
Okay. Jesse Smollett, or as Dave Chappelle calls him, Juicy Smollett, is the guy that staged the hoax, the actor that staged the hoax about a hate crime in Chicago. And you can read up on that story. It's linked to the Chicago.
Yeah, it's a famous story, right?
He's recently been indicted again.
There was a noose, and there was bleach, and there was people wearing "Make America Great" hats.
Right.
Right. Allegedly.
So, long story short, mid to late June, Dixon, with his camera in hand, took a bunch of people into Wegmans, and one of the groups went to if you're walking in the front of the store, okay, from the parking lot side on the front, one group went to the right to cause a diversion, while Dixon and a young family went over to the left side of the store, and they had a guy on a motorized scooter, one of those electric carts. He's driving it around. That gentleman is black. The guy that portrayed the store manager at Wegmans is white. They have an exchange in the aisle over a product that's not on the shelf that they want to see that the black gentleman would like to see in the store. The white manager has a pretty heated exchange and tells the guy to leave, and then follows him out. And as he exits the store, as the black man exits the store on his motorized cart, there happens to be a Williamsport Bureau police officer standing with their back to the parking lot, right? So facing the store, talking to Wegmans employees, as if the police had anything to do with this entire incident. And as the guy exits the store, he yells, "Black Lives Matter, Black Product Matters," and then drives into the parking lot just randomly, okay? And then the video closes out that was shared.
So tell us what the products that he had in his hands were and what he was complaining about.
So the exchange, he's holding up a box of Aunt Jemima pancake mix and is arguing about the fact that he wants Uncle P pancake mix, which is Master P, who's a rapper. His real name's Percy Miller, I believe. And, this guy ends up spiking this box of pancake mix on the floor. He grabs a box of Uncle Ben's rice out of the front of the cart, ends up arguing about that. There's a girl in the background of the shot that talks about, well, they're fake, which is ironic in and of itself that Derek Dixon's running around using a fake name called Derek Rizzo, but that's a whole other story for a whole other day. So the guy in the cart spikes the two boxes, the manager picks it up and then chases him out of the store.
Now lower the boom and tell us exactly what was really going on.
They were staging a hoax. They were staging a racially charged incident to try to promote the Uncle P pancake and Uncle P rice brand.
Master P.
Run by Master P, right? That's his brand.
Right.
So they're trying to perpetrate this on Wegmans, on the general public, calling it a commercial, which what? We can talk about
the weirdest commercial ever. But the truth of it is that he recruited a guy, right? He recruited a guy to play the role of the store manager.
White guy.
Recruited of the store manager? No, he's a white guy, right?
Yes.
Okay. He recruited a guy to play the role of the manager, Rob, And then he recruited a guy to play the role of the person that was complaining about the fact that there's no product there that he wanted. And then the real family of the guy that they recruited to play the manager was in the background cheering on the guy in the wheelchair, okay, or in the motorized scooter. And then they recruited other people to stage a distraction so they could shoot this without the permission of Wegmans, which had happened in their store, and basically posited the idea that this was something that really happened when it didn't. All of it was fake.
And the diversion was so successful, the police did show up. That the staff and management of the store were so concerned that public safety and customer safety were in danger, the police had to show up to the diversion. Not the video, the diversion.
Right. So where does the dumpster fire that is the Williamsport Area School District, where does that end? When does it end? When does this end?
It sounds like this is arguably racist behavior on this gentleman's part, encouraging racial stereotypes and racial division. And wasn't he?
The video, there's no question about it.
Right.
When you see the video, it is really poisonous.
Right, and also wasn't
it's not one video, Rob. It's like 6.
Right, wasn't he at one point he was hired by the school? Correct. He was a coach, right? So he was a member.
Coach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that almost sounds like the system had someone that was racist. Almost like Williamsport Area School District is filled with people that are systemically racist. Yet those are the same people that want to point the finger and say, it's not us, it's the system that's racist. This is a joke. I mean, I feel bad for you all in Williamsport. The truth is, this sort of stuff, I haven't heard it to this extent, happens all around this country. Can you blame this guy for, seriously, if you throw ethics out the window, if you're only interested in the bottom line, advertising or getting notoriety or fame or getting your name out there, can you blame anyone engaged in these racial hoaxes? Can you? Yeah. Is there ever consequences for anyone? Has Jussie Smollett paid the price? Has Bubba Wallace paid the price? All of these people you hear, incident after incident after incident. Do any of them pay the price? We have set up a system where we reward racial hoaxsters. We reward hucksters that are designing to spread anger and animosity between races. We reward those people. And so, as a result, we get more of those people. And it's tragic, and it shows that in Williamsport, particularly, another incident where another person who was a coach that apparently did something very terrible to a student, the very people that these coaches should be protecting the most, that's their first job, they let them down and actively were involved in harming these students. And yet, where's the school board? Where's the people to speak up about this? Instead, they're out there virtue signaling, oh, well, everything's systemically racist, Black Lives Matter, blah, blah, blah. That's what it looks like to me as an outsider.
So, in closing, before you give me your final comments, I wanted to make sure that I threw these out. I don't know if you guys knew, but we are now firing Teachers of the Year for saying that President Trump is the actual president. I saw that. We're firing those people. We are seeing that we have a new person running for president, and that's Kanye West and his FU money. Okay. He had a gathering in South Carolina. We had Selena Zito. I don't know if you realize, but Selena Zito has left Twitter. She deleted her account completely. Selena Zito is the only journalist that accurately predicted that President Trump would win based on her observations outside of Pittsburgh in the counties surrounding Pittsburgh that were blue dog Democrats. We also have had some warnings from the Republican Party that because of the rampant voter fraud, not only in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, but across the country, that we all should confirm our voter registrations to confirm that you are registered to vote, because there are Democrats that are taking Republicans' names and putting in registrations, voter registrations, and changing them or saying that they're moving, and that way so that you can't get to vote. Of course, you can fill a provisional ballot, especially if you can prove that you voted there forever. But this is the type of stuff that they're doing. Final thoughts, Todd, Bartley, then Rob.
I would just encourage everybody to read the story on talkwilliamsport.com. There are clickable links to any one of the videos, and there are multiple. They not only did this at Wegmans, they did it at Your Choice on Washington Boulevard. What's really, really disturbing about
it's like a gas station that has a grocery store in it.
Right, it's a convenience store with a gas station. Right. What's really disturbing about the Wegmans incident is that the gentleman that portrays the black gentleman that's portrayed in the Wegmans incident did a predicate video leading up to that, talking about, well, we're going to go to the store and we're going to cause a scene and we're going to protest, and it's going to be enough that the police are going to be called.
We don't care what they say or what they think, right? We don't care what they say or what they think. We're going to go and protest. So
there was intent there to do that. Right. I can't get into the details, as I mentioned in the story, about what law enforcement agencies are looking into this case.
Obviously, you found out that there's an active investigation.
Surrounding
this incident specifically, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And the civil side, all the companies that were reached out to, the Quaker Oats of the world, the Mars Incorporated, Mars International, that owns one of these brands, Wegmans Corporate. Their lawyers are now putting their heads together of what kind of response are we going to have to this incident, because this is heinous. Right. I mean, we're living in a racially charged time in this country, and to have a fake commercial portraying this type of incident right now,
it's abhorrent. Only the most ignorant and unattuned media person in the world could do this. What's the over-under before you think that Derek Dixon pulls these things off his social media?
Midnight tonight.
Okay.
So here's my request. Here's my request to this community. Okay. I'm waiting for the Jennifer Lakes school board member, Lori Bear, school board president, Williamsport School District, Dr. Bowers, superintendent, any of the supporters, Tim Miller, former Williamsport police officer, former Sunbury police chief. Where are you now? The mayor of Williamsport denouncing this. Where are you publicly? You have my email. You have my cell phone number. I'm all ears. You want to denounce it? Where's Jimmy Webb of Webb Weekly, who he works with? You want to denounce it?
Like Derek Dixon says all the time, where are you at, Williamsport?
Where are you at now? We're waiting for you. Where are you? We're waiting for you.
Rob?
You going to denounce it, or just going to leave it sit there? I yield my time to Robert Knorr. Gentlemen, have a great week.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I mean, it's an excellent story. I read it when you sent it here before the show, and I was just like, Williamsport, my goodness, just
You're scratching your head, right?
The insanity. It's unbelievable. So, no, thanks to both you, and thanks to our guest, Senator Mastriano, as well. I really, 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 and I guess I'll use my closing statement to say this. I thought his answer about what we could do was excellent. I'm really impressed with that. I think that he's spot on, and he's a good man. He's someone who got into serving people. That's why he's an elected official and not a politician, because he wasn't there for a career. He was there to help people, and I really appreciate that, and I just wanted to give him a shout-out specifically for that. But when I'm thinking about, I'm having such a weird time in my life. I'm trying to get a second job. I found out I'm going to be a father for the first time. I'm actually, personally in my life, more successful and happier than I've ever been. But at the same time, I see the country I love like falling apart. And so it's a weird range of mixed feelings for me. And what I have to constantly remind myself is to keep my spirits up, to not get depressed by what we see, because no matter what, we know that we are on the correct side of this. We know that we are the side that's not trying to silence people, but that's trying to foster free speech. We're the side that's not suggesting violence, but suggesting having dialogue to stop it. We're the side that's suggesting that we don't use violence and intimidation and shady tactics in order to win elections or to get power. So that's how we should take comfort in knowing that we're on the right side of things. We need to start acting as individuals. The first step in order to solve this problem, again, as I said earlier, is that politics is downstream of culture, and culture is downstream of individuals. The first thing that we could do It is time for the silent majority to stop being silent. You have to speak up. You can't let people... I'm not saying you have to be a jerk. You don't have to yell and scream at people. You don't have to raise your voice like I do sometimes. But you just need to let people know you will not be bullied. You will not be silenced or be told that you're morally inferior by a bunch of people that want to see destruction and want to encourage racist or Marxist behavior. Do not bow down to these people or fear them. And if something happens and you lose your job, I know it's a threat that I face daily with my employment where people threaten me because of my opinions. We will come together as a group, as a collective, as patriots to make sure that anyone that suffers will have opportunities going forward. If you do the right thing, life has a way of showing you the correct path. And so I just encourage everyone out there, get involved in local politics, get involved in voting and things like that. Start speaking and let people know that you're not just a silent majority, you are the majority. And we're tired of seeing the direction that our institutions are driving our country to. And we're going to stand up for the values that made this country the greatest in the history of the world.
Robert, congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
We're actually changing the name of the program and the name of the network now. Pennsylvania Patriots Radio +1.
Oh, yeah. Somewhere out there's an aunt that I haven't talked to on the phone yet that's listening to this like, what? Rob didn't tell me they're having a baby. So I'm sure I'll hear.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
are we doing the gender reveal on the show, Carlos, at some point in the near future?
You have to ask Rob.
August. I'll know in August. We could do something like that. Yeah.
So my sentiments in closing are the same with Rob. Never in my lifetime have I seen this country gripped by so much fear. Not even in 9/11. Fear of the virus. Fear of the people near you. Fear of anyone who questions masks. Fear of left-wing mobs. Fear is a destroyer. So I wanted to quote a guy that, I do a lot of studying about the papers that were written by the founders. There's a historian, his name is Wilfred McClay. He said, and I quote, "A proper history of America must do this without evading the fact that we often failed miserably, fallen short, and done terrible things. We have not always been a land of hope for everyone. For a great many, yes, but not for all. And so our sense of hope has a double-edged quality about it. To be a land of hope is also to risk being a land of disappointment, a land of frustration, even a land of disillusionment. To understand our history is to experience these negative things. But we wouldn't experience them so sharply if we weren't a land of hope. If we didn't embrace that outlook and aspiration. To use a colloquialism, we Americans allow ourselves to get our hopes up, and that is always risky. I feel like our job here with Robert and Todd is to help you stiffen your spine. And stiffening that spine means that you must understand what it means to be a conservative that believes in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And that is principally an allegiance to the truth. But we can't stiffen your spine without your consent, because it's hard. Change is hard. Change in ourselves is hard, much less other people. To stop smoking, to eat, not to eat right, but to eat healthy consistently, to exercise consistently, to do things that are to your benefit consistently. Many of us struggle with that. Imagine what it takes in trying to change others. But If you want to seed another generation to the left, go ahead. But Todd and Robert and I will be working to stop them with anyone else that wants to step up and do that too. So please, don't explain your decisions to not kneel. If you support the nuclear family, or funding our police, or are anti-Marxist, or if you simply love America despite its flaws, stand up and stop explaining your decisions to do so. We'll see you next week.